The word slipped out before Callum Voss could stop it. One moment, he was standing in the sunlit executive conference room, balancing a tray of coffee, and trying not to look nervous in front of the most powerful woman in the building. The next, he was reaching toward her trembling hand, saying softly, "Careful, baby. It's hot." Every voice at the table died. 12 senior executives froze. The legal director stopped mid-page. The assistant by the door forgot how to breathe. And Aurelia Sterling, the famously untouchable CEO who had fired managers for arriving 2 minutes late, slowly lifted her eyes to the single father standing beside her. Callum's face drained of color as he realized what he'd just called her. But instead of humiliating him, Aurelia leaned in close enough that only he could hear, and whispered, "You finally said it. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the strange ways love finds people who've almost stopped hoping, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Echo Tales." Callum had never meant to become part of Aurelia Sterling's world. He'd only meant to keep his job long enough to cover rent, buy groceries, and replace his 9-year-old daughter's broken glasses. For 6 years, his entire life had revolved around Maribel, a bright, watchful child who drew houses with yellow doors, because she believed every safe place should look like sunlight lived inside it. Maribel's mother had left when she was 3, taking 2 suitcases, a short apology, and leaving behind a silence Callum had never learned how to explain. Since then, he'd worked warehouse shifts, delivered groceries, repaired office furniture. Any job that let him pick her up from school before dark. He had no savings, no connections, and no room left for pride. What he had was patience, steady hands, and the stubborn conviction that his daughter should never feel like a burden. His job at Sterling Meridian started as a 6-week maintenance contract. The company filled 42 floors of a glass tower overlooking the city, sunlight pouring through windows that made everything look cleaner and more important than it was. Callum fixed cabinet hinges, replaced desk panels, hauled boxes between departments, and quietly repaired things people had stopped noticing. He came in before most employees and left in time for pickup. He kept Maribel's newest drawing folded in his wallet next to a grocery receipt and a photo of her missing front tooth. Most of the staff barely knew his name, but they knew him as the man who never complained, who found lost keys, remembered which receptionist needed extra back support, and once spent his lunch break fixing a visiting employee's son's broken toy. Aurelia noticed him on his 4th day, though she pretended not to. She was 38, elegant without seeming fragile, so disciplined that people mistook it for coldness. Business magazines called her relentless. Competitors called her impossible. Employees lowered their voices when she walked in. Under her leadership, the company had tripled in value, while her private life had shrunk to a string of empty rooms, unread messages, and dinners delivered to a penthouse she rarely reached before dark. She had spent years building walls strong enough to keep disappointment out, only to find the walls kept tenderness out too. Their first real encounter came on a bright Tuesday, when Aurelia's private elevator stalled between the 29th and 30th floors. Callum was nearby when the emergency call went out. By the time the doors were forced open, she'd been trapped for 23 minutes. To everyone else, she looked composed. Callum saw the white around her lips, the way her fingers dug into her sleeve. He didn't announce her fear. He crouched at the opening, spoke evenly, and guided her across the gap. When her heel caught, he steadied her without making her feel helpless. Then he handed her water and said quietly that there was no shame in being afraid when the ground disappeared under you. No one had spoken to Aurelia like that in years. People usually rushed to tell her how strong she looked. Callum was the first to notice that strength and fear could live in the same body. After that, their paths crossed more often, some meetings accidental, others arranged by Aurelia behind excuses so thin even her assistant noticed. A sticking drawer needed attention, then a shelf, then a crooked frame. Callum always came with his toolbox, fixed the problem, and left before the silence between them turned personal. Still, small details build a bridge. Aurelia learned he packed 2 lunches every morning, one for himself, one for Maribel. Callum learned she only drank her coffee once it had gone cold, because she always forgot it mid-task. She learned he hummed while concentrating. He learned she touched the silver ring on her right hand when she was anxious, though she'd never been married. One afternoon, Maribel's school closed without warning after a burst pipe. Callum had no one to watch her, and missing a shift meant losing money he couldn't spare. With the building supervisor's permission, he brought her in and set her up near the maintenance station with colored pencils, a sandwich, and strict instructions not to wander. She lasted almost an hour. Then a loose page skated across the marble floor toward the executive corridor, and she chased it, nearly colliding with Aurelia. Callum arrived seconds later, certain his contract was about to end. Instead, he found Aurelia kneeling in her cream suit, while Maribel explained the yellow door in her drawing, that yellow doors were for people who needed to know they were welcome before they even knocked. Aurelia studied the drawing longer than necessary, then asked if Maribel would make one for her. It appeared in Aurelia's office the next morning, framed beside awards worth more than Callum earned in a year. Things shifted slowly from there. Aurelia started joining them for lunch in the courtyard behind tower, always in daylight, always claiming she needed fresh air. The courtyard had young trees, stone benches, and food carts sending warm smells into the afternoon. Maribel talked enough for all 3 of them: school projects, neighborhood cats. Her plan to become an architect who designed homes no child could ever feel lonely inside. Aurelia listened with an attention that surprised Callum. Around Maribel, her sharp edges softened. She laughed without checking who was watching. She let mustard sit on her thumb. Once, when Maribel crowned her with a paper crown, she wore it through an entire call with the finance department. Callum tried to ignore what was growing in him. Aurelia belonged to a world of private drivers and boardrooms and decisions that made headlines. He belonged to overdue bills and the discount aisle. Worse, he couldn't risk Maribel growing attached to someone who might vanish. He'd already watched what abandonment did to her. He wouldn't invite it back into their lives in an expensive coat and a beautiful smile. Aurelia felt his distance and misread it, assumed he saw her only as a powerful employer. She'd spent years surrounded by people chasing her money or her name. Callum wanted neither. He never asked for favors. When she quietly covered Maribel's glasses through a company assistance fund, he tried to pay back every dollar. When she offered him a permanent position, he only accepted after confirming he'd earned it on merit. His refusal to take advantage of her should have reassured her. Instead, it unsettled her. It meant he could walk away needing nothing from her at all. The break came on a bright spring morning, sky pale blue. The trees outside just starting to bloom. Sterling Meridian was announcing a major acquisition. Investors filled the building, cameras waited in the lobby, every executive on edge. Short-staffed on catering, Callum was asked to help serve the boardroom. While the numbers on the table were large enough to change thousands of lives, Aurelia had barely slept. Her father, the company's founder, had suffered a medical emergency the night before. He was stable, but she'd spent the morning pretending she wasn't terrified. Her hand shook reaching for her coffee. Callum saw it. For one unguarded second, the room disappeared, and he saw only the woman from the courtyard who listened to Maribel's dreams, who pretended not to be lonely, who started looking at him like she was, waiting for something he was too afraid to offer. "Careful, baby. It's hot." The silence afterward felt endless. Callum wanted the floor to open beneath him and began to apologize. But Aurelia's face stopped him. No anger there, just pain, hope, and a tenderness so open it made him forget the room full of executives. She leaned in and whispered, "You finally said it." She'd heard the word as more than an accident. Weeks earlier, Maribel had teased him in the courtyard, saying he only called people baby when he loved them enough to worry. He used it checking her for fever, fastening her bike helmet, waking her gently for school. Aurelia had laughed it off at the time, but she'd remembered. Callum stepped back, overwhelmed, and the meeting rolled forward, because people in rooms like that are trained to act like hearts never interrupt business. But the moment followed him all day. He avoided the executive floor, fixed a cabinet that wasn't broken, reorganized tools that were already in order. By noon, he'd half convinced himself her whisper had been a joke, or a warning, or something he'd misread entirely. Then came a message asking him to meet her in the courtyard. She was waiting by the bench where the three of them usually ate. Daylight showed what office shadows hid, the exhaustion under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the vulnerability of a woman who decided she'd rather hear the truth than stay protected by not knowing it. She told him she didn't want an apology. She wanted honesty. She admitted she'd started listening for his footsteps outside her office. That Maribel's drawing was the first thing she saw every morning. That she'd spent years believing success would eventually feel like love, only to learn that applause couldn't hold her when she was frightened. Callum listened, hands clenched, then told her why he'd kept his distance. Maribel's mother leaving, the unanswered questions, the nights his daughter waited at the window, believing any passing car might bring her back. He could survive his own heartbreaking, he said, but he couldn't watch Maribel lose someone else she trusted. Then he admitted the harder thing. He loved Aurelia, not her company, not her wealth, not the version printed in magazines. He loved the woman who wore paper crowns, forgot her coffee, and kept a child's drawing next to her greatest achievements. Aurelia didn't promise a perfect life. She promised something harder, that she wouldn't disappear when things got inconvenient, that she'd show up, explain herself, and stay honest even when honesty cost something. She didn't ask for a grand declaration, just a chance to earn a place in their lives, slowly. Callum gave her that chance. The months that followed weren't a fairy tale. They were better because they were real. Aurelia missed a school recital when a meeting ran long, then showed up at Callum's door with flowers and an apology instead of an excuse. Callum wrestled with his pride whenever she paid for dinner or offered help. Maribel sometimes went quiet after good days, half afraid that happiness was just a warning that someone was about to leave. Together, they learned that love isn't proven by grand promises. It's proven by returning again and again. Aurelia started leaving the office early twice a week. She went to parent-teacher meetings and learned to braid hair badly. Callum helped her visit her recovering father without turning every feeling into a business decision. Their worlds didn't merge easily, but they merged honestly. The penthouse filled up with crayons, mismatched mugs, and a small pair of sneakers by the door. Callum's apartment gained fresh flowers and a framed photo of 3 people laughing in the courtyard. Almost a year after the conference room, Sterling Meridian held a daytime family celebration in that same courtyard. Employees brought their kids. Music played under the trees. Long tables groaned with food. Maribel stood by a display board presenting her design for a community housing project. Yellow doors throughout. Aurelia had quietly funded it, but insisted Maribel's name stay on the concept. As the afternoon sun warmed the glass tower, Callum found Aurelia watching Maribel from beneath a blooming tree. He handed her a coffee and warned her it was hot. This time, he paused on purpose before calling her baby. Aurelia smiled, eyes filling. She knew the difference between a word that slips out and a word that has finally found the nerve to stay. Months later, Callum proposed in that courtyard, with Maribel holding the ring box. No cameras, no board members, no prepared speech, just a yellow door painted on a small wooden plaque and a promise that their home would always be a place no one had to earn their welcome into. If this story touched you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Echo Tales. Your support helps more stories of hope and second chances find the people who need them. And before you go, drop a comment. Love is choosing to stay. A reminder that the strongest families aren't always born together. Sometimes they're built through patience, courage, and countless ordinary acts of care. Years later, the framed drawing of the yellow door still hangs in Aurelia's office. Visitors assume it's tied to the company's community program. Only Aurelia knows what it really marks. The moment she stopped living behind walls and let herself be known. Callum still worries over hot coffee, forgotten meals, and rainy sidewalks. Maribel still smiles every time he calls Aurelia, baby, remembering the day one accidental word revealed a love two adults have been too afraid to name. And every morning, when the three of them step out together into the daylight, the yellow front door closes behind them, not as a barrier, but as a promise that they'll come back.